Hello, everybody. My name is Gilda Ross. I'm the Glenbard Student and Community Practice Coordinator. So glad that you're here on this beautiful, beautiful afternoon. And the good news is we are going to come back at 7 p.m. So if you enjoyed the program, which I know you will, please get ready to share. And that's our ask of everybody. As you know, the Glenbard Parent Series is open to anyone, everywhere. Sister who lives in Poughkeepsie or Rockford. We're always so happy to share these free programs. I'm really excited about this book. When I heard about it, Michelle has been on the list for a very, very long time. So many people have recommended this book and this speaker. So I'm really delighted. We'll be talking about 14 talks by age 14, and in this case, 15, 16, and 17. So glad you made it.
With that, we're going to go into Q&A. I want to share really quickly a couple ways that we can stay in touch if you liked today's talk. Instagram is one. It's just my name, Michelle Icard, at Michelle Icard, and I am having a lot of fun over there. I try to keep it funny and give away a lot of free parenting tips and advice from the book. I have a public Facebook page, which is Michelle Icard, author and speaker. I often get a lot of requests to my private account after a talk, but I only, that's just for people I know in real life. And then Less Stressed Middle School Parents is the Facebook group I mentioned to you earlier, which is a really supportive place to ask questions about parenting a tween or a teen. So with that, I will end my screen share and ready for any questions.
That was wonderful. You know, we've hosted so many of these people, but you do a really lovely job of taking the research and making it accessible, understandable. This idea of a construction project is so wonderful. What a wonderful visual to keep and to not take it personally, because all of us who've been there know how easy it is to go there, especially when one day they love you and then the very next day as they enter these years, it's pull your hair out. This pivoting to the assistant manager is really is wonderful. Fixing it less is so key, and listening more. I love the way you talked about appearing less needy. That to me is just so key. I often say that this is how we started GPS with a middle schooler who one day thought I was great, and the next day, you know, was just like, "Why are you talking to me?" So that was great. So being prepared and knowing that this construction project is going on, they're going to try on different personalities and the risks that they take. So it was just wonderful. My question for you is, I'm hearing a lot about how parents these days are having such a difficult time connecting with their children. There's pandemic perhaps, but building that connection. Kids will say, you know, I just don't talk to my parents until maybe dinner time. They want to connect, but it's the challenge about that. Can you suggest something?
Ways to connect when, are you asking ways to connect when it's just a very busy sort of lifestyle?
You know, maybe in good times and in bad, best ways to connect with our children.
Yeah, sure. So I think the less pressure on connection, obviously, the more kind of natural it's going to be. A really cute thing that someone mentioned doing in the parenting, less stress parenting group, they shared with us, I learned so much from the parents in that group as well, is they sent a text to their kid and said, you don't have to answer this on any time frame, just give it some thought, but I want to know, can you send me a list of things that you think are just very fun to do? I would love to have that list so that when we have time, I can maybe offer to take you someplace or we could do something together. And the child, who was not very communicative with them, loved being asked by text and loved being on a no time frame pressure. And funny enough, because I think the parents said, like, no rush, take your time, that list came back fast. And they really connected over that. Also, part of this inability to read facial expressions translates really well to communicating by text or through journal or written word. I know that this is probably why so many parents say we have our best conversations in the car when we're not looking at each other. So I think that shifting to different modes of connection and exploring ways to do that. I know a lot of families will play Wordle and share their scores or whatever it may be, but it doesn't have to be a formal dinner sit down conversation. I would look for these small little moments and use technology to your advantage there.
And I know you talked about the risk taking that they had this need for, and that need can be satisfied with other kinds of positive risk taking, didn't you? You talked about that a little bit. So maybe the fun things that are risk taking, like you know, repelling or
Oh,
whatever.
totally. We have a thing in my town, everybody might, where it's like you're skydiving, but it's indoors and it just sort of blows you up in the air. That's a nightmare to me, but I would do it if my middle school kid is like, I want to do this with you. I think I would give it a shot.
Yeah, or the climbing at the health department or the park district. Right.
Right.
Good. Emily, I know you have a question.
Yeah, Michelle, thanks so much. I mean, what a great opportunity for all of us to be reminded that we need to talk differently to kids, and it's paramount for the success of the relationships. And anybody on this call, I have a 22 and 20-year-old, and these tips were equally as helpful for me. I'm thinking about walking out in the office too, and just thinking of that brief, begin peacefully, relating to the person you're talking to, really seek to understand and getting that data, and then really validating and echoing what they hear. Such really, really key points. Really appreciate that about what you talked about. We have a couple questions that I have two that I'd like to be able to ask you from our audience. We have a parent who, kind of in thinking about the exposure to choices, that buffet, letting them take risk, that kind of thing. They call it human flourishing in their house. But they seem to be spending a lot of time with TikTok and video games and crushes and like that peer connection. And this parent is wondering how they're really struggling with how to enforce kind of the other aspects of life while balancing what their kids want to do, thinking about their cultural needs, nature, service, sports, but doesn't want to be a micromanager or a controlling parent. Any advice on that?
Yes. So I love the way that this parent is thinking about framing this. It shows some respect for what is the cultural norm for my kid at this age, connecting this way, understanding what's happening and on this platform, perhaps. And also realizing that, I still need to guide as a parent and create balance. So there is a section of the book where I give a pretty complete example of what it would be like to have a tech family meeting. And really the highlight that I would like to shine a spotlight on right here is you don't want to villainize tech. This parent is not, which I appreciate. You want to talk about technology as having pros and cons. And when I'm talking to kids, I introduce it like any tool. If any tool is useful to you, it's also dangerous to you. If your stove gets hot enough to cook something, it's hot enough to burn you. If the knife is sharp enough to chop something, it's sharp enough to cut your finger. So technology is the same way. So I would say, like, I love tech. There's so many amazing things it can do for me and so many ways it can hurt me. So as a family, you can come up with a list of all the ways tech does good things for you, and be really appreciative of that so that your child doesn't shut down and think my parent doesn't get it. You do that, and then you say, now let's look at the ways tech could derail us, right? So it could go from I don't want a stranger connecting with you and showing up in our driveway, like the very worst, to sometimes you just look at it for so long you don't feel good about yourself anymore. Your time is wasted, or whatever it may be. Once you have that list of sort of pros and cons, you can work from there to say, let's talk about balance. So if we as a family value tech and we recognize it's not everything, then let's talk about the other pieces of a really healthy, happy life. And that would be some movement, and that would be some in real life social interaction, and that would be schoolwork, and that would be, all these other things. Once you have an idea of what those components are, then you might say something like, okay, so if we know that we are checking off these other things, like we've done some movement, we've gotten some fresh air, we've enjoyed nature, read a little, whatever it may be, it's going to be different for every family, then tech gets its piece of the pie. Like, it's great to veg out to TikTok or to Instagram or whatever it is for a little while. So I think if you can approach it really respectfully about pros and cons, your child will be much more able to engage in that conversation with you.
And so validating to the child, right? Because they feel like what's important to them has been heard, but you, as the parent, you're not micromanaging it, but you're helping them find the balance, which we all know is necessary. So a really excellent advice.
Great.
My question is, we know this time of year is a very, very much an at-risk time in terms of suicides, depression. When do I seek help for my child? When do I understand that this is not normal? Speaking of how their need for to peer normal, when do I seek a professional?
So with the caveat that I am not a psychologist, I will tell you what I learned from Lisa D'Amour, who we all know and love. And the idea is, and we see this, that adolescence is a roller coaster, right? Your kid is going to be sort of up and down all the time. And so they're moody, fine. Sometimes they're really happy, sometimes they're really sad. That's to be expected. I think when you see that they have kind of reached the depths of the roller coaster and it's not picking back up again. And I don't know what the length of time is clinically that you would say that is, but I think you'll know, gosh, my kid, this one's pretty sustained. We're going on a couple weeks here and there's no light in their life or in their eyes. Then I would say, it can probably not hurt to go and talk to someone. And it's tough now to get an appointment kind of nearing the end of the pandemic. So a nice thing to do is to sort of get on someone's roster when things aren't that bad. So I would err on the side of just kind of having a consult, and you can say, like, things are going really well right now. We have a big transition coming up to the next grade or whatever it is. So it'd be really cool to get you in. So you knew that you had a person on your team should anything come up later on. And if you can present it that way, then they might even be more amenable when something happens.
I love the way you describe that, Michelle. Someone once talked about how, again, that transition to college, how useful it is when you have normalized and destigmatized the fact that we're going for help while you have that child in your home. And so, well, maybe it's time to go see a counselor again. So I love the way you describe that. Mm-hmm. My last question, I don't know if Emily has one last question, but my last question is about the self-compassion that parents need to incorporate in their own life. Can you speak to the importance of that? Because I think we're so hard on ourselves now, because it is so hard now.
We really are. And I love that you asked me that question, because often a parent will say, I have a daughter who's turning 12. What's the most important thing I can do? I got asked this on a panel recently, and I said, this is going to sound like a joke answer, but I really mean it. Get a hobby. Because your child is individuating and pulling away from you and you don't want to appear needy, it is really important that they see you living a full and happy life. That is a wonderful example to them. It is nurturing to you. You'll be a better parent. And it takes that burden of them being everything to you off of them. When I went through a very emotional situation with girls breaking off their friendship with me in middle school, I never told my mom. I didn't tell either of my parents because I knew it would be an emotional burden to her and she would be crushed. So if you can do anything for your kid during these years, show them that you are resilient. You have things that you love to do and you are interested in, and that their social success or not doesn't impact you. I also have the private parenting Facebook group, Less Stressed Middle School Parents. Like I said, a lot of high school parents there as well, or elementary school parents. And I am on there talking to you a lot, chiming in, answering questions, and it's a really great group. So with that, I will stop sharing and we can do questions.
Michelle, just wonderful. Your visualizations are so wonderful. I was struck when you talked about our kids are asking, am I normal, as part of their construction phase of body, brain, and image. about how we need to be empathetic, because the goal is normal, is independence. We don't want them living in the basement, right? So we become the assistant manager and we can't appear needy. Boy, do I love that one. But my question is, it seems like we really need to get our own selves together at this time, doesn't it? More than ever before. I think about my husband would pick up my son from school and so excited to see him. And if one day he just looked at him and he said, "Dad, I can't go there now." And we so the need, timing is everything. But so can you speak to that, getting your own stuff together, please?
I will, and I'm so pleased that you asked me this, because often parents will say, "Oh, okay, I have a daughter who's turning 12. What do I need to know? What do I need to do?" And they have this sense of doom when they when they ask it. And I say to them, this is going to sound like a joke answer, but I really mean it. Get a hobby. It is so important when your kid enters early adolescence that you have a lot of stuff that you enjoy doing outside of being a parent. They need to see you do those things. They need to know that your happiness is not dependent on their success at this construction project. And you get to really model being a well-rounded person who takes care of yourself and nurtures yourself, and they will learn that from you, and you will not be frustrated by the fact that they don't want to hang out with you as much.
Joe, I know you have a question.
I do, Gildan. Thank you. Michelle, I was absolutely delighted with your candor and your common sense approach to adolescent development and how we can preserve our relationships with our children. And I think a lot of people are probably wondering how to make the transition from Michael Scott to Dwight Schrute right now. So Bears, Beats, and Battlestar Galactica, that might be it, right? If you like The Office. Of all the things you said, one that I know that educators are focused on and really struggling with, I think you encapsulated it, it's that urge to be accepted, right? That intensity, and how that kind of overrides rational risk taking, right? Because there clearly is positive risk taking. Where we're seeing it in schools, and I was wondering if you have a perspective, is the role that social media plays with this concept of I know you. And we've all encountered young people who think they know someone, they've never met them, but they know them through their phone. And there's that liking that goes with it. Could you give us some of your perspective on how that urge is impacted by social media?
Sure. So I would say that also we adults know people just online. And so I think my view on tech and on social media is that as parents and educators, we need to come at this conversation from a very balanced viewpoint. If we villainize tech, if we dismiss it, then we're going to lose this conversation right away. I say that any tool can only be helpful if it can also be harmful. So the stove is only helpful if it can get hot enough to cook your food and burn your hand. And the knife is only helpful if it's sharp enough to cut through the apple and your finger. So social media is the same way. I think it's really important that we recognize that it is a tool, and it provides some very valuable things for kids. It is, in most circumstances, the culturally normative way in which kids connect. And so to say it's not valuable is dismissive to them. However, it is also dangerous, right? And so we have to have a very balanced conversation with kids about that, recognizing what it provides, and also opening the conversation with them, not just at them, but with them, about the ways in which they can be derailed. And it'll be different for every kid. For some kids, it's body image. It's this constant comparison to other people online. That's the pitfall. For some people, it's stranger danger. That would be a smaller category, probably. For some people, it's being open to online bullying or harassment. For some people, it's just mind-numbing, wasteful hours spent, right? So figuring out personally what it is for that kid that could be the pitfall, and again, just being able to be honest about the pros and cons. I think you can get there, and then you can say, knowing that this is the danger of this tool, how do we work together to keep you safe from that? And there's a whole chapter about that and guidelines for that. So I really appreciate the question, and I think it's all about how we approach it.
Michelle, I have one more, if I may.
Please.
So I really appreciated you operationalizing the term sensitive listener, right? Whether it's your partner, your child, your colleague, your coworkers, or a subordinate in that case. What I was thinking about was really, I think a major point that I'm hearing is that you acknowledge the vulnerability as they're moving away from, you know what, I want to be just like you to, now I'm going to be my own version, but I still love you. And I think that's a really interesting piece. And I just appreciate that you were able to kind of call that out as sensitive listening.
Thanks for saying that. Yeah, I do want to encourage parents to make a friendly, meaningful connection and still be willing and able to set boundaries and expectations. It's such a dance.
Yeah.
Two questions here. One is, someone's asking about the conversation. So give us, of your 14 conversations, what are the areas that you go into, very briefly?
Sure, I'm glad you asked. I did not want this book to be a bummer from beginning to end. So not all the conversations are hard, awkward, thorny conversations. Yes, I want you to talk about sex and sexuality. Yes, I want you to talk about self-harm and suicide. Yes, I want you to talk about, those big, hard things to talk about, substance abuse, that kind of stuff. I also want you to have fun with your kids. I want you to have conversations that are creative and interesting. So creativity is one. Money is another. Independence is another. So it really is a big span of what I did is I polled all the parents in my group, 10,000 parents, and I said, what are you having the hardest time talking about? And what messages do you most want to be sure your kid gets when they're done with their adolescence? And from that, I pulled the topics.
Well, some really great techniques on how to get there. This is an important question. How do I get my child to open up?
Yeah. Okay. So the brief model is one. So that's what we discussed. You have to switch how you're talking. You have to not appear as needy. But the other thing that works really well for kids this age is just taking it away from a traditional conversation. I found with my own kids, when I took it to text, they were really much more willing to chat. First of all, it gives them time to respond. Mm-hmm. And so with their impulsively thinking brains, it can be hard to come up with an answer right away. So that takes that pressure off. It also takes off reading your facial expression. So one of the parents in my group posted that she had a kid who wasn't opening up to her very much. And she texted him and said, you can get back to me anytime. No deadline on this. I would just love to know a list of things that you love doing. And then maybe sometimes we can do some of those things together. And she thought that she just threw it out into the ether. And I think because there was text and no time limit, she got a list back right away. And her kid was like, I love this. This is fun. So shift may be the way that you're talking.
Michelle, our last question, and we've touched on this at noon. This is such a challenging time for everyone. I know that parents are really struggling with, when do I seek professional help? Mm-hmm. And you and I talked about our friend, Lisa Demore. Can you talk about that again, please? When do I seek help?
Sure. So I really like Lisa's advice and analogy here, which is that teens and tweens are going to be moody. It is a roller coaster, and, peaks and valleys to be expected. So if your child is just crying on their bed one day, and then the next day they're fine, they're watching TV and they're okay, and then the next day they silent treatment, that's a teen, that's okay. If you feel that they are in a valley and they are not chugging in that roller coaster back up towards the ascent, that's when I would become concerned. So when they plateau, and it's going to be different for every kid, remember that every kid has sort of a different volume. Some are real introverted, some are not. I love to be alone. I could be in my room alone my entire adolescence and nothing was wrong. But if you feel like this is not what I'm used to from this child and there are no peaks and valleys, then I think it's a really good time to reach out. I will also say it is hard to get in with a therapist right now because of the pandemic. So a nice thing to do for your child might be to get them talking with someone preemptively and just say, let's just get you a relationship with one more person who can be on your team. And then if something comes up later and you don't want to talk to me about it, which I would completely understand, we've got somebody already who you can get an appointment with.
Yeah,
And
that's great.
Gilda and Michelle, if I may add, here in Illinois, we recently just implemented the requirement that we are advertising to all students where the crisis hotline is, and it's on their ID cards on the backside. A lot of times we find great advice from peers. You know, it's not always the best advice from your best friend, but we do find that, especially after the last 2 years, our students are a lot more sensitive to the needs of their peers and they want to help. So we're trying to help them operationalize that by making a productive call.
Very
I
good.
love that.
Very good. You know, I put a X here by this about fix less and listen more. And I think about, I want to share this with you. You and I both love Julie Lithcott-Haynes,
Mm.
and she talks about how, why would we want to deny our own children the success that they might feel about a success? Is it our success or is it their success? And why would we want to deny them the beauty of that? And I thought that was great. So many takeaways.
I'm thrilled. And I love what you just said. It's true. It's really their journey.
Thank you so much. Everybody's ordering the book. That's what I can see here.
Yay. I'm glad. Thank you all.
Great. Come back, everybody. Share. See you next time. Take care.
Good night.
Thank you.
Pleasure, Michelle. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Great to meet you.